But Kyrie, you get invite. Hopefully, it should work. It says it's adding you on. Yes,
What's
my
going on, Zane? Salam
man.
alaikum, brother.
Salam, bro. What's happening? You good?
Oh, man, really good, man. As you know, we've been waiting to do this for a long time. We've wanted to do some lives together, share both of our knowledge and our experience with both the wonderful sports of MMA and professional boxing. And here we are, displaying to the world what we already discussed behind closed doors that we're going to share to everybody right now. And don't forget to like and subscribe for Zane's Boxing Dosage and Kyrie Abu El-Kheer on YouTube channel.
Yeah, make sure you subscribe up to Kyrie's YouTube channel, man. He's the best in the game at MMA. He knows his stuff, and he's a great sort of person, man. And I wouldn't say that if he wasn't. So make sure you follow him up, man. Check his content out. It's brilliant as well. You get me? MMA, and yeah, all sorts of mixed martial arts, even boxing discussions. So even if you follow boxing, make sure you get on to the YouTube channel.
I always feel that, it is very difficult to have a mixed martial arts conversation without talking about boxing as well as jiu-jitsu. Both of those sports are very important to the sport of mixed martial arts to put it together in terms of MMA as a single compository sport.
Yeah. Bro, 100%, man. I wanted to ask a few questions to you as well, personally, because obviously you're an MMA fan. So what do you feel about this MMA and boxing crossover thing? What do you feel? You think it's a good idea that all these fights are happening, crossover fights between MMA fighters and boxers?
I think that this is something that has been happening in one form or another throughout all generations. For example, take a look at Inoki taking on Muhammad Ali. That was sort of what you would consider a mixed fighting type of event, right? So that was basically an MMA fight, but obviously Muhammad Ali came in there dressed as a boxer, had boxing shoes on, was allowed to kick, but got kicked himself as well. But nowadays, it's just more about with the MMA guys coming into the boxing world. And rightfully so, because when it comes to boxing and MMA is a baby compared to boxing in terms of the mainstream aspect of it. Now, have people around the world always competed in mixed martial arts? Yes, in one form or another. You've seen it in movies such as the Kumite with Bloodsport and Jean-Claude Van Damme in the 80s. That is what essentially is mixed martial arts. The only difference is they didn't have the commercial value that boxing has that you can match with Premier League football or American football with the NFL or the NBA. Well, nowadays, that's the reason why the mixed martial artists have to step into the boxing world because of boxing's long history. That makes them the A side of the fight world. So therefore, it is easier for the MMA fighter to be sent into the boxing ring, be exploited, taking away all of the weapons that he can use against his opponent, and have to fight in this single skill set of a sport that really requires a lot of niche training that you don't get in MMA. And in particular, the repetitions of punches that you have to do on a daily basis as compared to, let's say, a boxer in comparison to an MMA fighter. Now, with these fights, some of it is not all equal. They always say that, well, the MMA fighter is always going to lose in this situation. We've seen that with the likes of Jake Paul taking on all these mixed martial artists that have championship pedigrees behind them. The problem is not all matches are the same. And that is one of the things that we have to be very careful about with this Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou fight. They're not all the same. For example, you take a look at Clay Collard. He was a former UFC vet, is now signed to the PFL, has beaten the likes of Anthony Pettis, a former UFC champion in the PFL, but has also beaten a lot of undefeated prospects from the top-ranked promotions. And this is an MMA. So we have to understand that some matches in boxing versus MMA within the boxing Queensberry rules are not all equal.
Well, you know, one fight that did strike me by surprise was when Anderson Silva beat Julio Cesar Chavez. You remember that?
That's right. And I was actually about to mention that, you know, great minds think alike in that end, right? So the reason why I thought that was a good comparison to make was because you look at Anderson Silva. He's always been a slick fighter in the way that he fights in MMA.
Yeah.
Right? Always uses counter shots, always uses counter fighting. And unfortunately, this fighting style is very detrimental and a very bad matchup for a lot of Mexican style boxers, which is what Julio Cesar Chavez was. Hence the result that you got, and hence the narrative that I go by with not all boxing versus MMA matches are the same. We can think that it goes one way because we know of the professional prowess of one professional boxer.
Yeah.
But again, it all varies with the opponents and the individuals that are fighting in this MMA versus boxing crossover.
100%, bro. But what do you think of this matchup, Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou? It's coming up soon, you know?
I think that a lot of the boxing guys in the hardcore realm of things have a real problem with this fight, and I can understand why. But from an MMA perspective, and from the guys that are in the MMA community, they all love this because of the fact that Francis is getting paid, and the fact that his storyline from one border to another, getting caught by the Spanish border guards, by the Moroccan border guards, and then all the other border agencies that he was trying to get into Europe and whatnot. And then he comes into Europe. He doesn't even know what MMA is when he hopped in France, right? He wanted to be a boxer, which is what makes the fight very intriguing. Because of the fact that he never wanted to be an MMA fighter, but he ran across an MMA gym and they said, hey, you want to try this sport out? He's like, what is MMA? All I know is Mike Tyson and boxing. And lo and behold, guess who's training him right now, which I think is one of the most gimmicks. But at the same time, it kind of goes into...
In a minute.
Say that again?
Mike Tyson's training in a minute. That's mad. I can't believe it.
Now, what do you think about that? Do you think that Mike Tyson is a formidable trainer? Because we both know that training and fighting are two completely different things. And Conor McGregor shows that in the Ultimate Fighter performance that he did as a coach. Right. He damn near only had one win in the entire season of Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor in the Ultimate Fighter, where they have their fighters taking on their fighters. But of course, that's neither here or there, because the one disclosure I got to give to people about that is Conor McGregor had prospects as opposed to Michael Chandler having all vets in his team, guys that already fought in the UFC. So maybe that's not much of an indication of his coaching prowess. However, it still shows he's not the best coach in MMA, but he is one of the greatest mixed martial arts fighters ever. And you could say that same thing about Mike. When you say, what do you think about Mike as a trainer? Do you rate him as a trainer, or do you think that this is just a gimmick to try to make it look like he's Rocky training Creed?
Honestly, I personally think, like, I haven't really seen him train someone, innit? But as far as boxers training, like former boxers becoming like boxing coaches, like sometimes it does work out and sometimes it don't. A particular example where I see it don't working out is like Roy Jones Jr. He was a formidable boxer. He was a great all-time great, you know. And when it comes to training fighters, like you can't really teach them that well. They start losing, you know. And I've seen that with Chris Eubank Jr. And when he went with Bomac, you got what I'm saying? We had a totally different outcome.
And
yeah,
you look at
he's
Bomac,
training Carlo now as well.
You look at Bomac, and this is a great comparison I could make with my Muay Thai coach, right? I had a Muay Thai coach that was, well, let's just say that he's kind of in the same shape as Bomac, right?
Oh,
To say it very kindly, okay? They're in the same shape as Bomac, but guess what? As much as he's in the same shape as Bomac, he had the mind for Muay Thai and MMA. And I'm talking about my coach, Jeff Baca, that trained me from the 2010 and then till on. The guy is brilliant. He understands fighting, which kind of shows you that the bottom line is it doesn't matter how the coach looks or what he's done in the past. It matters how he can relate to his fighters, what he can teach them, and what he understands about the opponent in relationship to how they're going to match up in their upcoming fight. And John Fury is also another example of that. John is a great coach, even though I'm going to always agree with all the antics that he does. The man is a coach, right? He didn't have the best career in professional boxing, but that's because of the different circumstances that he had going on. He didn't properly train for a lot of these fights. A lot of these fights were short notice, but the knowledge is still there. The experience is still there. And even though Mike Tyson has all those things, I think Mike Tyson, for understanding him in the mentality of as a coach, has too much of an ego to perhaps maybe give the proper coaching that he needs. I think that's what it comes down to, because one of the reasons why fighters don't make great coaches is because their egos are too high for them to empathize or sympathize with the fight they're dealing with.
Ego is a big thing in boxing, man. Trust me.
What was
ego is a big thing in boxing, man. Everyone's got a big ego, man.
Yeah.
No, it is. Man.
But sometimes it helps when you don't. And I think that's where Bomac is really, I mean, he's a shining star when it comes to that, right? Dude, I feel bad for him.
You gotta give him a lot of credit. You gotta give Bomac a lot of credit.
But you know what? I feel bad for him right now because he's in a jail in a foreign country. But by the way, from what I hear, right? To any of the real G's out there that have been locked up in the UK, please write on the comment section below what it's like. But I heard it's a lot less strenuous than an American prison. So for any of the top G's out there, the top boys that can answer this particular question, how is Bomac living in the UK prison system as opposed to locked up Rikers Island?
He's in prison. Can't believe it. But you know what? It is what it is, man. I hope he comes out soon, man.
Yeah.
But you see, Ngannou fight, this Fury Ngannou fight, I think Fury's gonna beat him, man. That's just me being honest with you and totally real about it. I think Fury's gonna knock Ngannou out, and it's just gonna be mad, because if it was an MMA fight, no doubt Tyson Fury's gonna lose that fight, and Ngannou would beat him. But it's boxing, man. Boxing.
Tyson begs to differ with you. He thinks, this is what he said, right? He's like, what? He's not a jiu-jitsu man. He's not a wrestling man. He's not a good kicking man. He can't do anything better than me. So I can beat him in MMA. And he really believes this. He really believes that he can stuff the takedown attempts of Francis Ngannou and then just beat him up on the feet, and then possibly, this is you gotta right? This is man who claims to be the baddest in the world, so he believes.
Bro, but you see with Tyson Fury, he says everything, and sometimes he says things that he doesn't mean, man. I think it's one of those things where he's just talking in the moment. I don't really think he's gonna get in there inside the octagon with Francis Ngannou, man. But obviously, the Usyk versus Fury fight is happening as well. Apparently that's a done deal as well. So what do you?
What in the face to Francis Ngannou,
Huh?
right? That's a real slap in the face. Hey, you want to hear an MMA equivalent to that? You know Ray Mercer, right?
Ramos. Yeah.
He knocked out an MMA champion, a UFC former heavyweight champion in the regional scenes, okay, in an MMA fight.
Yeah. Okay.
And
That's mad.
you know what's funny? I see so much parallels in this. The guy he knocked out was, get this, a 6'11" Tim Sylvia, who, by the way, kind of looks like Tyson Fury, but the MMA version, right? He was one of the earlier guys back in the days. This was before Brock Lesnar came into the scene of the MMA world. He had an MMA fight planned after Ray Mercer. Does this sound familiar to you? Tell me if this sounds familiar. Tim Sylvia, the UFC heavyweight champion. I don't think he was a heavyweight champion at the time, but he has the status of being a former UFC champion. He plans a fight with Ray Mercer, but months after that, he already had another MMA fight planned out. This was before the UFC had people in, ironclad contracts where they won't allow you to fight anywhere. Back in the days, you could be signed to the UFC and then randomly go fight in Japan or some random regional, like show with a bunch of bikers and gangsters around in a bar or something like that. Nowadays, you'd have to ask Dana White to do as little as a grappling contest. Well, actually, no, they let you do grappling contests because, to me, grappling is part of fighting, but grappling is not fighting, if you get what I mean, right? Whereas if you do boxing or kickboxing or MMA, this is real fighting. Whereas to me, in my opinion, although it's good experience, grappling is a sport, not a fight. And I think there's a lot of guys that would agree with that. That's why when I see jiu-jitsu guys, they say, "Oh, I'm gonna get into a fight this weekend. I'm in a fight." What's your fight? Oh, well, I'm entering the Naga, grappling tournament. That's not a fight. You're getting in there, and I grapple myself, right? So, it's like it's not a fight. It's part of fighting, but nonetheless. Speaking of that, but Bilal Muhammad, you know Bilal Muhammad, right?
Yeah.
The guy that trained with Ennis Boots, which is what was that guy's name? Shoot, I forgot his name. He was a Philadelphia guy who he beat that was undefeated in Abu Dhabi. But he trains with, and Bilal Muhammad said that he's going to do a grappling tournament the night before UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. So that's what I'm saying. The UFC allows you to do grappling fights, but they won't allow you to do boxing fights unless you're Conor McGregor. And so where was I going with that? Oh, so what I was saying with that was shoot, I forgot what we were talking about. It's going off on a tangent there. Oh, okay. So yeah, doesn't that sound familiar with Tim Sylvia? He had a fight that he planned months on ahead, and then he took on Ray Mercer, who's a boxer, because he thought this is just going to be easy work. And then the boxer knocked him out in his own sport. So what I'm saying is that with this Francis Ngannou fight, could we be seeing a Tim Sylvia situation with Tyson Fury? And if so,
personally, I don't think so, man.
Well, my question to you, if he loses to Francis Ngannou,
Bro, that would be a huge upset, bro.
Well,
the biggest upset in boxing history, bro.
Is he still going to fight Usyk for the undisputed championship? How does that work?
I think they've got a deal in place after this Ngannou fight that they're going to make this fight official. So apparently they've sorted out all the terms and conditions. All it is just the fight to be announced, I think it is pretty much there and done. Both can get it on.
My question is, do you think that Francis deserves a title shot? Because if he knocks him out, we're just not going to consider him.
Why not? If Francis Ngannou knocks out Tyson Fury, then he deserves a fight with Usyk, or definitely a rematch, because he's doing the impossible here. everyone's gonna think Fury's gonna win, regardless of how Fury looks, because he's the natural boxer. You know what I'm saying? So that's the way it is. But if Ngannou manages to somehow pull it off, he deserves all the credit in the world, man. Because that's a like Tyson Fury. Don't get it twisted. Even though he's fat and out of shape, he's like the best heavyweight in the world, like arguably. You know, and people would definitely pick him right now as the best heavyweight in the world.
Isn't it a bit deceptive, his body? You know, before we got online on this live right now, we're talking about, you know, his body, right?
Mm-hmm.
What it means to be in shape for him is different than, say, who's somebody aesthetically pleasing, such as a Tommy Fury. Now, if Tommy Fury came out with looking like he has a belly or a little love handles, you should be concerned, because that is not his natural disposition of fight shape.
No,
now with Tyson Fury, it's easy for people to say, oh, you look out of shape because you have love handles. The man has always had love handles.
He always had them, yeah.
But if you look at his belly, is his belly out to here the way that it was in, let's say, 2016 or 17, when he showed up at Monaco to try to get signed by Eddie Hearn, right? He didn't look so he's a little bit.
But his belly's always been like that. That's the thing. People that don't know, because obviously they're MMA fans, they might find that as a way of a weakness, but that's the way Tyson Fury is. Man. He's just always had that sort of body, man. And it's just
we have something like that in MMA. We have a lot of guys like that in MMA that, you know, they don't have best looking bodies, but, you know, are top level fighters.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I've seen that still. Like Daniel Cormier. Not Daniel Cormier. Yeah, there was some other guy. He was a big guy.
Yeah, Cormier, yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, like only people I'm really interested in MMA are the Muslim fighters, man. Like, because they're just raw, man. The Dagestani fighters. Like Khamzat, man. When's he fighting?
He is fighting the week before Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury.
Who's he fighting? Paulo Costa, isn't it?
Yeah. Fighting Paulo Costa, yeah.
I look forward to that fight, man. What do you think's gonna happen, man? Do you think it's gonna be all Khamzat?
What do I think is gonna happen?
Yeah,
on
neutral.
With Paulo Costa and Khamzat Chimaev. Okay, so I mentioned this in the video that I did, where Khamzat Chimaev is now officially an Emirati citizen, and I go into.
I saw that still.
So you guys check out that video. I talk about a whole range of different subjects in there, literally a whole range of subjects. Not only did I go into the kicks and punches of that particular fight, I went into the geopolitics that is involved in that fight with Israel Adesanya. Just literally cost the UFC a whole lot of money. Now, I want you to imagine a world where you're Dana White and you literally now have to explain to the shareholders of the UFC that one of your biggest stars in the world, Israel Adesanya, a guy who has swagger, a guy who can dance, a guy who understands the hip-hop American culture and comes from a very exotic place like New Zealand, but has a Nigerian background. All these cultural mashing that you can add into the repertoire of Israel Adesanya's marketing. All of that now gone with having a champion that is a Nazi. Okay? Now, I know that sounds harsh to say. I understand that Sean Strickland has redeemed himself from his old ways, came up with having black training partners, other minorities that train with him and help him in his preparation for his up-and-coming matchups, leading all the way to the championships. I understand that's not fully the case. The problem is Sean Strickland still says a lot of racially inflammatory things that, let's just be honest, a lot of right-wing, working-class white guys can relate to. Let's just call it what it is. And the problem is, when you have a company like Disney, that is a serious problem to deal with as a company. So now, what do? Because Israel Adesanya came into this fight expecting a tune-up. The executives of Disney, the UFC, Zuffa, the Endeavor Management Group in LA that is affiliated and owns the UFC, they were all expecting a tune-up fight in Sean Strickland. That's not what they got. What they got was a very horrible stylistic matchup, which, by the way, is a reality in mixed martial arts on any given day. On any given day, anybody can beat anyone around the world and in any gym. In any gym around the world where there's sparring going on, there's championship level guys that are getting beat, and then there's guys that are current world champions getting their hands put on by somebody who is lesser than them in the rankings, and they are world champion, getting their butts whooped, with the likes of Mike Tyson mentioning this. And by the way, this is the reason why Vince McMahon said that he never wanted to buy or somehow invest in mixed martial arts when he had the chance to do it. And the reason why is because you cannot build stars in mixed martial arts. And primarily, that is the reason why a lot of guys have these problems with fighter pay. Because the reality is that it's not that the company doesn't want to pay you any more money or anything like that. The reality of the situation is that the company just can't afford it or justify the salary that they're going to give you with your lack of contribution to the sales or the pay-per-views or the merchandising that deals with the company. So that is their justification behind all that. And unfortunately, sometimes they can be right about that. So that's the unfortunate thing about fighter pay that you have to understand. So now, Sean Strickland is the world champion. Is he a popular champion? Well, to be honest with you, I think he's very popular among the hardcore MMA community. And I think that alone projects a different level of view as opposed to what is in the outside world, the mainstream world. Because I always emphasize and tell you guys, what you have and what you got going on in the MMA world will not always translate directly into the mainstream world. So just because, let's say, a group of people support Sean Strickland, it doesn't mean that he's going to make Conor McGregor numbers. Israel Adesanya already has been proven to be a star over and over again. And then there were times where, let's say, he didn't have the highest pay-per-view numbers. It tanked because maybe he didn't have the right opponent. Maybe he didn't have the right promotion leading up into the fight, or just the right amount of hype or interest that he created leading up to those particular fights. But nonetheless, he is still a star. And on top of that, the way that Sean Strickland describes him in the Nelk Boys podcast is that he somehow fits a certain agenda. So how symbolic that he goes into this fight, wins against a guy that has these contrasting values that he does. Look at Izzy. He's got his nails painted. He wears pearls and he's a male. He does a lot of things that are quintessentially contrasting to the ideas of, let's say, traditional masculinity. And then here comes Sean Strickland, who fills all those roles in his current moment of time and in his current stage of, let's say, his persona that he has, right? In comparison to, let's say, his past persona as a former neo-Nazi of a Los Angeles skinhead gang member, right? All these things are bad news. So even though he's not really a Nazi, that's not the view of the world that is around him. That is not the view of, let's say, the average fans. They just hear that one time and they're going to run with it. And then on top of that, this is not something that Sean vehemently denies by any stretch of the imagination. You got guys out there that are former gang members, guys that have been part of terrorist organizations, people that have done horrible things, crimes against humanity, whether they were part of a government, a gang, or a rebel group, or any of that sort. A lot of these people, they will deny that they are part of any of these groups. You ask Sean Strickland straight up, he'll tell you, yup, I'm part of that. I was this guy. But because of that, it was because of this redemption story that I rose above it. I started hanging out with more minorities. I started becoming more of a diverse kind of guy. I started having different friends, so on and so forth. Now I'm the new Sean Strickland. This is my new persona, or this and that. Yes, this is all true. This is all a reality of what Sean Strickland has going on. But what he also has going on, unfortunately, are these other things that haunt his past. And this is the reason why the UFC and Dana White did not want him to win. They looked at it as a tune-up fight. Because let's face it, what was the big fight in the horizon? Do you guys remember the summer of 2023? One of the greatest summers of mixed martial arts, and probably even one of the best summers of my life. And part of that was because of the mixed martial arts that had gone on. And then the other experience that I've had traveling up and down California multiple times within a span of a month. But neither here or there. The point of the matter is, during that time of summer of 2023, you had UFC 290. Dricus du Plessis does what? He commits a serious upset in the same similar fashion that you get an upset with the likes of, right now, Sean Strickland taking on Israel Adesanya, defeating him. 5-round decision. Okay? Nobody expected that, just like Dricus du Plessis. So then he wins. They have this storyline going on with Israel Adesanya about who is the real African. And then, of course, it's tied into the South African apartheid history, and being that Dricus du Plessis is the ancestral inheritance of the people that may have colonized that land. Here he is. Israel Adesanya goes up in the octagon after his win, calls him the N-word multiple times, and then Dricus du Plessis only replies with, yeah, I may be African, but you're not my brother, and this and that. It was great. It was an absolute masterpiece of promotion that's supposed to lead to the next fight. You could have led it all the way to, let's say, November, right? And then it never had happened. So because of that, now Israel wanted to continue on his active streak that he had going on. He's a very active fighter, right? Constantly fighting month after month and year after year. Of course, he's had 80 to 90 kickboxing fights, over 100, almost 200 some odd combat sports events in his entire career. So he's a very experienced man, just like Sean Strickland is a very experienced man in ways that's not counted. He constantly goes and fights in the gyms. And guess what? He's constantly honed in. He's got his sights literally set up to its battle site, its battle zone, and its sense of alertness is constantly there. So he's just ready. He was at the right place at the right time, and then Izzy was just way too active and perhaps maybe a little too tired from all these training camps that he had done. Maybe he had stretched himself out a little bit too thin. But nonetheless, one of the things that I have to really tell you in this video, and that I have to emphasize, is really the UFC and its investors and business partners do not like this. But that's the beauty of combat sports. You can't control it. However, they are still a business. But at the same time, you can't control the results of the competition. Because even though we wanted to live in this main character syndrome world of Israel Adesanya being the hero and then fighting the South African colonizer, just like real mixed martial arts and the results that happen into it, it doesn't work out like that. Just like life, a lot of things don't work out the way that you want them to. You try to negotiate a certain deal, you don't get it. You try and make out a certain amount of, let's say, leverage to your side. It doesn't always happen. Maybe you want a little bit more, but then you got a little bit less from the negotiation deal that you had. Maybe you wanted a job that, let's say, described as doing something like this or doing something in the executive level, and then you get hit with, let's say, being an associate of some sort rather than, let's say, the top dog of the company. Okay, you wanted to be world champion or the gold medalist in the Olympics, but instead you ended up getting the bronze. That's okay. You can use that and catapult yourself into becoming the greatest boxer of all time, which is what Floyd Mayweather did. He lost in the amateurs, but he never lost in the pros, and he learned from that lesson. So that is the reality of combat. Your heroes aren't always going to win. And Sean Strickland, unfortunately, is the biggest anti-hero that I think you could really understand that is existing today in mixed martial arts. Again, I go at it over and over again. He was a former Nazi. He says all these things that are not desirable in the modern feminist world. And yes, those are some aspects that I may agree with on terms of what Sean Strickland views in the world. But in all honesty, I'm going to tell you guys, I don't like Sean Strickland's views on Islam. And if you want me to dissect and explain to you why, here it is. He's mentioned in the Nelk Boys that in Islam, we indoctrinate women into wearing a hijab. And he says that it's BS, that, yeah, it's their choice, it's not, or this and that. Here's the thing that Sean Strickland has to understand. He's looking at a world from a very deducted view in terms of the way that he only sees fit as to what he believes is morale. Now, the Western morale is be nice to everybody, treat everybody how you want to be treated. Yes, the golden rule. But then with Islam, there are certain things that are a little more complicated than that. For example, yes, there's a lot of things that we don't believe in, such as free mixing. Okay, we understand that in modern society, there are men and women that work side by side in all different professions. That's fine. But it doesn't mean that we have to choose to be in these types of careers that is not in line with our religion. And we have the choice to do that. But the problem is, with somebody like Sean Strickland, the way that he grew up, and even DC mentions it, no one ever loved this guy until he was in a gym full of guys. All right. So if you guys just saw that, that concludes that particular part of this segment. So yeah, I was basically showing you guys a video of Sean Strickland that I had done after he won his championship fight. I thought it was quite important to go into something like that because there's a lot of people that are not going to like Sean Strickland, but then there's also a lot of people that really love Sean Strickland. And by the way, one of the reasons why I thought it was really important to bring that up was because I think that at the time, and by the way, looking at the context of when this video was about a month ago, I had realized that, well, Sean Strickland is really a lot more popular than you think. And that's important to know. That's the reason why I played that video earlier. For those of you that have just recently joined us, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit some of the comments below, whatever you want to talk about. And let me know what you guys think with this particular topic between Khamzat taking on Sean Strickland possibly in the near future, or is he? Because obviously right now it's reported that Khamzat has a broken hand, and that could delay his particular shot with Sean Strickland. And how crazy is this? During that night, they were going to try to do the middleweight fight with Sean Strickland on a short notice. Now, imagine that. The fight was originally for you and another guy. And of course, you are the bigger star, being Khamzat. You have 6.5 million followers in comparison to a higher ranked Paulo Costa at the 185 division. But guess what? Khamzat gets a much better gift than that. And what exactly does he get? Well, what he gets is a former welterweight champion in Kamaru Usman, as opposed to Paulo Costa, which is a great win. He was a former title challenger, but what would you choose if you had the world in your oysters and what you would want to do? Would you rather go after a guy that was a former contender in Paulo Costa with probably a lesser of a name in comparison to Kamaru Usman, who's been in some big fights, has had the title runs, and quite frankly, in my opinion, is a better resume to beat in terms of names. Now, in terms of the value at 185, well, that's where the entire narrative shifts and where the argument starts. Well, he's not really a real middleweight. This was both of literally their debuts at the top level 185 division, even though one guy has never really had a middleweight fight. And I'm talking about Kamaru Usman. But with Khamzat, he never had a high level, high ranking 185 fight. So that's kind of the interesting storyline with that. They were going to bring in the champion on a short notice, which is almost unheard of in the entire sport of MMA, if not its entire history. So moving on from that, or actually just not moving on, more like digressing from that particular part of the year when Sean Strickland became champion, some of the comments that were on this particular content I thought was really interesting. Right? If you look at the comments, I mean, listen, I'm going to tell you, let's really delve into this, right? Because this right here is the interesting aspects of this particular content, is how people's reaction to it. Now, probably some of the most comments that I've ever gotten in a small channel like this, but nonetheless, it kind of shows you the type of attention Sean Strickland garners. Right. So I wrote right here, listen, before you comment, please watch the entire video. I take consideration to all opinions if you listen long enough. Many of you sound ridiculous thinking I still think Sean Strickland is a Nazi. He's not. We all change our opinions as we get older. Please listen till the end until you comment. So the reason why I had to say that is because when you read a lot of these comments, it is as if they really didn't take the time to really watch the entire video. And that's for many reasons. You have your own personal lives. You're not obligated to do what somebody on YouTube is telling you to do. At the same time, if you're going to really feel compelled to comment on a particular topic, or in particular some segments that I've said within the content, you got to watch the entire thing to get the full context. Because there's plenty of nuances in life. There's plenty of fluid changes that go on with people and their personalities and their lifestyles. So it's really important to document and keep track of all these things before you make a certain judgment. And you're going to see some of the comments below exactly what that is. And so this guy right here writes, Izzy was a stain on the sport. Sean is the redemption. So I did mention something to that effect. Yes, obviously, because that video I had mentioned that Sean Strickland had changed his entire life. And now he's in this verge of redeeming the MMA world from this champion who paints his nails. Okay. This is what I said. I did mention Sean's win was a gift from God because of how long are you supposed to live the horrible life that he did until blessings start happening. And then this guy writes, Sean is as much of a stain, laughing my butt off. That's another thing about this, right? We always judge Israel Adesanya, rightfully so. We always judge the likes of, let's say, Sean Strickland, and rightfully so. But in reality, we always got to understand that MMA is a sport for extremely broken people. And as a result of that, you're going to get some of the most dynamic, dangerous, and outright outrageous, spontaneous personalities that you will ever experience in the entire world when it deals with the sport of MMA. That's just the reality of it. So you're going to get these types of, let's say, spectrums of Izzy having sort of his own weirdness to, let's say, loving anime at an age that he's at. And again, this is not a knock on anybody that is over 30 that's into anime, right? It's just not the most, well, really, I mean, come on. It's not the most common thing, especially when it's a product that's made for kids. But that's neither here or there. And then Sean, we can break down his behavior. He's also very erratic. You've seen a lot of the videos that he's made where he's in LA, right? Doing all these, let's say, road rage stare downs with people, where he goes and challenges people in the street, but will create some sort of agreement that, hey, listen, just make sure you don't have any guns. Now, you know what's crazy? Speaking of which, right? I talked to a lot of the European fan base of this page and all the other combat sports chats that are out there with different guys from the UK, Ireland, and maybe even other parts of non-English speaking European countries. And it's just crazy how they look at America as this gun-ridden place to where you can possibly get shot anytime. Now, again, they're not completely wrong, right? Because if you're in the kind of environment that, let's say, a lot of these gang members live out here in Los Angeles or in the California areas, whether it be the Bay Area, the North, the South, the Central, in Fresno, it's a gang-ridden place. And if you're in environments like that, it is kind of likely that you will somehow come across some people with guns, if not get a gun pulled to your head. I know Nick Diaz has mentioned and referenced that plenty of times during his lead up to the George St. Pierre fight back in the day. And, but overall, aside from gang-ridden places and people that live in the countryside that will pull shotguns on you for walking up to their property, America is basically a much safer place than most places in the world, right? And by the way, interesting, going into that little tangent, in the UFC 294, they had mentioned how Abu Dhabi was the safest city in the world, which I thought was really fascinating for them to say. And you know what? Statistically, they can prove that. At one point, Saudi Arabia was also one of the most safest countries in the world. That was until, obviously, the likes of Osama bin Laden came into the scene and Al-Qaeda got into fights with the local government and obviously with the United States and whatnot. And so that fact was no more at some point during the war on terror era, starting from the 90s, before even 9/11. But now Saudi Arabia is also being able to claim that particular stake of being one of the safest countries in the world, now that a lot of that is sort of died down, at least in their side of the world, not so much obviously with the likes of Israel or Palestine or other conflicts that are going on within the region, perhaps maybe Syria or Iraq. But nonetheless, it's safe for the most part, and they've been able to attract a lot of the top names of the world in terms of like talent, in terms of, let's say, other professional sports realms like Formula Racing, PGA. Now you got boxing, and now the UFC is announcing that they're going to do a show sometime in March of 2024, which I think is really fascinating for Saudi Arabia and their brand and their tourism and what they're trying to do. On top of that, with this evolving relationship with the UFC, that, by the way, I believe is somehow, how do I say this? I think they are managed and helped by the company that also now owns WWE Endeavor, which is a company that has bought it off of Vince McMahon. And as you know, the WWE has had great relationships with with Saudi Arabia for a certain number amount of years now, where they're doing tours over there. They're doing their own version of WrestleMania on top of a regular WrestleMania that they usually have on their WWE yearly schedules. So now it made that relationship a lot easier. And lo and behold, you have this fight going on with Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury, which they had basically, in my opinion, I think the UFC uh, missed out on the bag because of the fact that they didn't want to invest in Francis Ngannou going into this fight, which they sort of think or know that he's going to lose because of Tyson Fury just being the best boxer in the world. And then you look at Tyson Fury, right? I had mentioned this with Zayn Musa Boxing when we talked about the decepting shape of Tyson Fury, meaning that the guy is supposed to look like he's out of shape, not really in cut up, aesthetically pleasing appearance. But not at any moment does it hinder his performance, because obviously you've seen Tyson Fury. He's very fast, very elusive. Well, now you look at him, he looks even leaner for his own standards. And again, we're not judging by the standards of the IBFJJ bodybuilding competitions or anything like that, or Arnold in his prime, or even Francis Ngannou in his current state right now, looking like the African version of Arnold Schwarzenegger as this modern action superhero lookalike that's living in our modern times, now about to box Tyson Fury. But the thing is that he's way in better shape than we've ever seen him for his standard. And I'm talking about Tyson Fury. So because of that, you got to think that Francis Ngannou is in a very dangerous matchup, and possibly getting the most dangerous version of Tyson. And by the way, I believe this fight is still only 10 rounds and not 12, because the WBC did not want to add, or I don't know. I don't know why they did that. They did 12 rounds for McGregor. Obviously, it just ended in the 10th round. Perhaps maybe they want Francis Ngannou to have a certain amount of time being able to, let's say, work or possibly survive. Which, by the way, I'm going to go into the prediction of that particular fight and then go back to what I'm talking about with Sean Strickland and Khamzat. So just real quick, I think that fight has a possibility of going to a decision, and I'm going to tell you why. For one, you have to think, have you seen the Derek Lewis fight with Francis Ngannou? How did it go? Well, I can tell you how it went was exactly like this. They were very slow. They were very hesitant. They didn't want to engage. They were literally staring at each other. If you've ever seen a meme where it says, hey, your controller is off, player one and player two, their controllers are not on. That's literally what you're seeing out of Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis when you were watching a fight. And of course, he ended up losing that fight just right after he lost a decision from Stipe Miocic. So Francis Ngannou, as much of an exciting fighter as he is, also has a lot of boring qualities to his particular style that I think is going to lend itself into this particular fight, which is why you shouldn't be surprised if it goes to a decision, being the fact that they're going 10 rounds. By the way, how many rounds did Conor McGregor last with Floyd Mayweather? 10. He didn't even last the final 10th round of that fight. He got stopped, obviously. You guys seen the fight. Nonetheless, that's the prediction that I have for that fight. I'm going decision with Tyson Fury. And even if Francis somehow looks good in any capacity whatsoever, you know that the Saudis have their money on Alexander Usyk as well. And by the way, I had mentioned that Alexander Usyk needed this fight for Tyson Fury. And I've mentioned this in the past. Why? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because let's just be honest. Alexander Usyk is not a mainstream name. Do you know him? Yeah, you know him. That's why you're watching this right now or watching this in the future. Do the boxing heads know him? Yeah, of course they're supposed to know him. Do the other fighters in boxing know him? Yeah, they're supposed to know him because they might face them one day, especially if you're Witherspoon and you just got this fight to fight him just so he can try to get used to fighting in heavyweight. Neither here or there. The point is, you got to know who Alexander Usyk is if you are within the boxing world. In the outside world, where people have their own lives, their own Kardashian shows that they want to binge watch on Netflix or Hulu, they have no time for these boxers that are some of the most skilled boxers in the world, but you're not compelling any of them to wanting to go see you fight. There's always this talk about, yeah, I'm going to let my fighting do the talking, man. Yeah. Okay. You do that. How's the ticket sales going? I look, I don't mean to be demeaning. That's not my style to do that. Right. I hate doing that. If I've done that before and caught myself doing it, I'm going to punish myself for it and not like it and try to live in an ethos that doesn't go into that particular pattern of thought, right? I don't like that. But sometimes you got to call it what it is that when you don't have a certain personality that's compelling to watch or listen to, it's going to be very difficult for people to get out of their comfort zones to watch you fight. Again, I said the hardcores are going to watch you fight, but the casual fans who have multiple interests, by the way, in a world full of multiple apps, multiple channels, multiple social media sites, you're competing for a lot of people's attention, right? Which is the beauty of the modern world, but also the curse in and of itself when it comes to, let's say, you trying to break into media and trying to break ground into, let's say, expanding an audience of some sort as a content creator. So why is that significant in all this that I'm saying about Alexander Usyk? The bottom line is the guy he's not a ticket seller unless he has the likes of Tyson Fury. And Tyson Fury now has to elevate himself even higher, fighting a big mixed martial arts name in Francis Ngannou, elevate his brand into going into that fight with Usyk. Because Usyk can't hold up his part of the deal. So in other words, let's say these guys have to come into a 50-50 table of promotion, right? Right now, Alexander Usyk is sitting at 30 and Francis Ngannou with the fight that Tyson Fury has is sitting at, let's say, I don't know, 40%, right? So he's 40% in the promotion table, and Usyk is what? The 30%. So Tyson has to go in here and basically take the other remaining percentages that Alexander Usyk can't pull in. And I'm not talking about numbers of, let's say, what they're going to get. I'm talking about kudos numbers, magic point numbers of popularity. So in other words, that's what Tyson Fury has to do, is work for Alexander Usyk to build this fight. And once again, he even mentions not an easy task because this is a killer in front of him. Right? At any given time, you can be knocked out, which I think is brilliant in Tyson Fury's part to promote it in that kind of way. But also, I truly believe that he believes that. He believes that because, let's just face it, Francis Ngannou is one of those once-in-a-lifetime stories, once-in-a-lifetime athletes that has a chance to create once-in-a-lifetime opportunities and spectacles like this, like knocking out and possibly upsetting Tyson Fury, which I think Tyson Fury is very coherent of, But at the same time, it's also the reason why I think that he looks like he's in the shape that he's in, because he's trained very hard, knowing that Francis Ngannou may not be a cakewalk, but at the same time, he still has to get through this unscathed so he can get in there with Alexander Usyk. So, write down on the comments below what you guys think of that fight as this fight week goes down. Today was the grand arrival for their particular fight, right? They had all the other guys that were in the undercard. You had the other heavyweights that were supposed to be in there. Yeah, it was great. It was great. Great on Saudi Arabia to be able to put on a show like that and be able to garner this type of attention. And they said that they're going to have all these different athletes and different superstars and celebrities are going to show up. So that's going to be very exciting. You could just only imagine the type of names that they're going to come up with and the type of people that are going to come. I mean, it's, yeah. What do you expect from a fight like this where you have two big names as opposed to, let's say, if you were just going to do Alexander Usyk in this particular night? You think that those guys were going to show up? You think Denzel would show up to something like that? You think Usher, or I don't know, what are some big names out there right now? Certainly Mark Zuckerberg or whoever is out there that's a big name. Tom Hardy, do you think he'd go to something like that? Jason Statham, do you think he'd go to something? No, maybe if they're hardcore or big enough boxing fans, they'll probably watch it at home, but not fly to Saudi Arabia to see Alexander Usyk. But now you put Tyson Fury in there with the likes of Francis the Predator Ngannou. Well, guess what? He's going to go in there and fly their happy behinds to this big event and be shown out when they turn up. That's the type of fight that you have going on with Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury. So, yeah, more on that during the week as we continue on with this fight week between Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury. But back to the comments in the Sean Strickland section, right? As I was going off on a tangent about that. So let's read some of the comments that they have here. Everyone has a view. Some are different. It is what it is. Super happy for him that he got the title and won the fight. Yeah, this is one of the interesting things about this particular subject, right? Is that even though we know all these things about Sean Strickland and all the horrible past that he's had going on or this and that, we still have this thing inside of us that's happy for him because, I mean, it's just a great underdog story, right? Kind of like what you have right here with Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury heading to this week. You kind of have that situation where, let's just really call it what it is, right? It's a great personal interest story from a man that has struggled all throughout his life just to come out through that adversity. So it's just in us to love these types of story fairy tales. But also, I think it's very prevalent in the West of capitalism, where everything is about, let's say, the merit of your hard work and what you're able to earn because of that and what you're able to achieve. So I think that when you have people that come out of the gutter and into higher positions, I think that we're automatically drawn to it right away just based on our societal upbringing in this hyper-capitalist world of the United States and the West. Not saying it's a bad thing, not also saying it's a good thing, but it's just an observation that I think worth mentioning. So the person here writes, all right, I understand what you're saying, man. Trust me. I hate Nazis as much as the next guy, but Sean Strickland made it clear that he was a dumb kid and realized he was wrong and changed his ways and is becoming a better person. You can't just hold it against somebody for life that they made a dumb decision as a kid. Izzy literally calling DDP a racker, but nobody seems to see a problem with that. And he's a grown man and was a champion at the time doing that. Ignorant BS. I mean, I don't see the difference here other than Sean was a kid when he was ignorant, and Izzy is just as ignorant as a grown man, a champion that people actually look up to. I mean, he lost a lot of support after showing his true colors. The only difference is Izzy said this recently, and Sean admitted he was a dumb kid and changed his ways. I don't really see how you can hate on Sean and not hate on Izzy at the same time. It's the same shit. So, the problem with that statement, I see what he's saying is that a lot of people love to put this aspect of false equivalence on others, right? Like, well, you're mentioning this guy. Why don't you mention this guy? Here's the thing, though. You're not talking about them in that particular moment. They are not the subject in that particular moment. So that is something to take into context when understanding this type of, let's say, communication amongst, let's say, content creators and the watchers. So just because somebody is criticizing somebody, and by the way, taking a context at this particular time, it was a lot more intriguing to look at, criticize, not just criticize, but analyze the full overall view of Sean Strickland's life because he was the winner more than it would be for Izzy. Now, did I just not mention things about Izzy when it comes to him painting his nails and wearing pearls and this and that? Like, didn't I mention that? Or do I have to somehow be outward about my dislike towards it and possibly, I don't know, get in trouble for saying things that you shouldn't say? Look, that's another thing too. I'll tell you this. As a kid, and maybe somebody who is a little bit younger, I understand what it was like to make, let's say, horrible choices of words. We all do. This is a common thing that we all face. Using horrible judgment when it comes to using certain words and what to say and what not to say, or what to do and what not to do. So, granted, Sean was in that light when he was a kid, and then he redeemed himself from it. And obviously, look what it came to his life. So, the same thing with mine, right? I'm just not going to go outright say the things that I really feel about Izzy, at least not all the time. And it's not warranted. And the thing is, I don't like to attack people's character because when you're doing a mixed martial arts page, it's sort of tacky to do that because you're covering MMA. And this is something that I think a lot of MMA content creators tend to forget. Sometimes they think that they're bigger than the show. And again, I don't want to mention which names in the MMA content creator spaces that are like that. But yeah, that's literally what you're getting out of that. Let's take a look at some of the replies in this. Yeah, so this person asks also, where are you from? Okay, so then he writes, it's best to just leave religion out of MMA. I don't necessarily agree with either of you on that, but it's kind of like the separation of church and state. Why even argue religion or politics in something that has nothing to do with either? So he's basically saying that religion and politics has nothing to do with MMA. Well, that is your opinion. I'm going to respect that opinion. But if you can respect my own opinion, I think that it does. Because when you look at UFC 294 and how it played out with Khamzat, which, by the way, the title of this is Khamzat the Mujahid. Why did I call him that? Well, what is it that you guys think that he said in his post-fight speech in Russian, not the English version? We know what he said in English. Let's all be together. It doesn't matter our religion. The kids are dying, and it makes me sad. We heard that part in English. He said something in Russian, which translated, a lot of people were saying that, Ramzan, I want your permission to go to Palestine and take up arms, something to that extent, quote, and I quote, Khamzat said this. So for you to say that religion has nothing to do with MMA, I think is very Very short-sighted, unfortunately. And the reason why that's short-sighted is because you don't want to take into consideration or empathize how that particular lifestyle or this particular faith motivates a lot of guys. For example, take a look at Bilal Muhammad, right? After he started training with the team Dagestani Eagle MMA, you started seeing a different level of his improvements. Now, all of a sudden, he's finishing guys on the feet. And by the way, when I was talking to Zain Musa Boxing, when I was talking about Bilal beating an undefeated guy that was none other than Sean Brady, I forgot his name at the time. But yeah, Sean Brady, he finished Sean Brady with strikes. Whereas we usually know Bilal Muhammad to just grind guys out if he can. But it showed a new wrinkle to his game, just like with Islam. It showed a new wrinkle to his game. I think a lot of that has a lot to do with religion. Why? Well, let's think about this, right? When Bilal Muhammad was training in Chicago, was he waking up at 5 in the morning to go train the way that he would in Team Eagle MMA? No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe he got up and prayed, but at the same time, maybe he didn't go and train straight away. Okay, so now he's with Team Eagle MMA. Now he's training in a capacity where he's waking up at this particular time because he has to wake up and pray, and then they train in the afternoon after afternoon prayer, and then they rest and they pray again for the third prayer, which is Asr during the day, and then Maghrib at night, and then Isha at the final prayer of the night, right? So this is a very regimented lifestyle. Yes, there's a religious aspect to it that was already ingrained from the Prophet, peace be upon him himself, right? But in between that, you're training for combat sports, athletics, among the prayer that you're doing. So, what exactly does that mean? Well, it means that it does have a lot to do with it. So, another thing, politics has nothing to do with MMA. So, explain to me why Khamzat can't get a visa to come to the United States and fight, and why they had to use the Emiratis to grant him citizenship so that perhaps he has a chance to come to the United States. But in the midst of that, it is the UAE and Saudi Arabia that have these alliances with Russia and the United States. And somewhere in between, they are the major players of a diplomacy between these two warring factions, i.e., the United States and Russia. Right? So you want to tell me that politics has nothing to do with MMA, that these two are exclusive from each other? I mean, I let you tell the story on that, especially with everything I just mentioned. So, okay, so you asked me where I'm from, and then okay, I'm from LA. Okay, LA, fellow Californian, but I'm willing to check out your story that you're talking about. I am just curious. Does it have anything to do with Strickland? I mean, the way that I read the comment, it kind of sounds like you had an interaction with him or something. Yeah, I did have an interaction with Sean Strickland at some point. I remember Sean Strickland came to my page where I had mentioned something to the effect of a Brazilian forest back in 2019 burning, right? And then they had these Saudi guys that donated their money. And then Sean Strickland came to my Facebook page and he mentioned something to the effect of, well, I'm surprised that Muhammad protected the trees but not the women. And then here's the thing that Sean Strickland is always obsessed with, right? He's always obsessed with this idea of how oppressed Muslim women are, right? And I think because he has a very deducted view of the world and he only sees it from his particular perspective, that I don't think he understands there's a certain religious devotion and a certain level of fear that many Muslims have towards God. And because of that, they're going to obey and worship and create a relationship with the creator in that kind of way, i.e., wearing a hijab, praying, going to the mosque, paying your zakat, all these commandments that you are asked of as a Muslim, right? He doesn't understand that some people are just motivated with that. And then also, you got to understand, Sean Strickland is very sick in the head. You got to understand, when he was 11 years old, his dad exposed him to uh, corn material, okay? And obviously, it begins with a letter P, but I just don't want to say it out like that. But neither here nor there. His dad exposed him to all that. So you got to understand that that somehow really messed with his mind in some kind of way. And it is no wonder that he looks at the world in this particular type of view. So moving forward with this. This guy writes, Tony. Wait. Let's read what this guy says right here. So, if we're being honest, let me see here. Okay. He says, okay, if we're being at all honest, more us men than are not exposed to some form of racism, hate towards the other, and its natural tribalism. We look different, so it's natural mechanism to point out our influences within the culture you are raised in as a fan or flame of, or more often than moronic viewpoints and mentalities. Most of us work through ignorance as we age and grow. Most of us, however, were in the company of morons spouting off shite if it can't touch something in our human tribal minds and stoke this ignorance too. I think racism itself, I'm better because my skin color is fucking laughable, if I'm honest. It's illogical and a notion without validity, so we should treat it as such. Give it no validity. It's not given in a mentality, thought, word, and other things without manifestation into actual meaning, broadly speaking. The core issue being vast differences in culture, this entirety of what is spouted as racism. Truth is, the cultures are so widely separated, it's going to be an insurmountable obstacle unless we have something to unite us as a country or as a common fight. That respect is an absolute, cause bloodshed is, because blood is shed or something in that realm. The entire story, the entire history of the world has groups of culture differences warring it out, and I'll stay this way without common binder. Okay. All right. So well said. And then much rather have an ex-racist champion than the current racist champion. Very happy for Sean. Okay. So mentioning that Izzy is racist. Yeah, that's something that's not really talked about as much, is it? Right? Because of the fact that Izzy was calling Drickus an N-word, and then he called him the C word on top of that. So, yeah. Let's see here. Some more of the comments here. Let's just call it what it is. UFC has a huge red pill fan base that are way worse than Strickland, but I hear what you're saying. I'd love to see Drickus versus Strickland. Let's see this white on white fight. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's go, Sean. I'm Latino. Good job, Strickland. You whooped that dog bender. Bow wow wow. Yippee yo, yippee yay. I'm just glad we no longer have a champ that paints the nails, brags about doing TikTok dances, and violates his dog. Shout outs to that puppy, though. Yeah, that is quite strange, right? That video that I guess surfaced about Israel Adesanya a few months ago. I don't even want to repeat what he did, but yeah, it has something to do with his dog. I'm so freaking excited and happy for Strickland. Yeah, as you should be, right? It's a great story. It's about fighting, dude, not marketing. At the end of the day, Sean Strickland won the fight. It's not about marketing. At the end of the day, Sean Strickland won the fight. Yeah. All right. So what I asked to this person, I don't know what I said to him. What did I say to him? Okay, I said, fair enough, but understand there are different sides of fighting. If you want that as your given right, then check out the video breakdowns and techniques such as this post-fight live that I did. This video is for those interested in what is going on behind the scenes and how it's being viewed from a public relations point of view. After all that explanation, the points just flew, didn't above your head, bro. Okay, he writes, "What are you talking about? Everyone knows Izzy convinced the UFC for the Strickland fight. Every hardcore fan by now knows that, which is why the UFC will never let a champion convince them of fighting someone who they can beat. Your whole take on this situation, the video is as novice as F. Did you even watch the fight or the highlights?" All right, so I did watch the whole fight. It was hard to even give Izzy a round. Yeah, that's kind of how I saw the fight. It was very difficult to even give one round to Izzy. It would just seem like an absolute one-sided beatdown. He says, "I'm Mexican and I love Strickland. He's not a Nazi, you tripping dude." Okay, whatever. Put on your seatbelt. You're okay. So, how about this? You are very good at what you do. I think your channel is going to grow big. Keep up the good word to Sean. He probably needs more internal work, as I don't believe he is reformed as what we would like to believe or make people believe. It's got a lot to get of hate out of your heart. Yeah, I see what you're saying, right? Like, obviously, this guy mentions Chris Curtis is his best friend. Guaranteed Chris laughed his butt off. So why are you so upset? Yeah, here's the thing, right? Just because he's friends with Curtis, okay, that's one thing. But being friends with him is another thing when, let's say, he goes and says these things about other groups, or he feels this way about immigration or this and that. And then, of course, people just want to toss it up as, yeah, he's just an American. This is just how he is, and this and that. And yeah, I get all that too. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. I think yours is wrong. He beat Izzy fair and square. He admitted his past. Were you raised the way he was? The man's a survivor. Yeah. Okay. So this comment right here is literally exactly why I had mentioned what I had mentioned on the top of the comment, which is what? Like, before you go and you judge this whole entire thing, okay, please watch the entire video. And that's kind of the problem with this particular current culture and time, right? I think a lot of people don't have very good attention spans. The other thing about this is that a lot of people don't know how to talk with each other. And what do I mean by they don't know how to talk with each other? Meaning that a lot of people just talk over each other. You ever just pass by a random cafe or some random restaurant and you hear people talking to each other? You just hear the way that they, let's say, interrupt each other. They're just waiting for one person to finish just so they can get their word in. But then at the same time, they're not really listening. And then on top of that, they overlap each other, where you have two voices talking at the same time. Because the problem is a lot of people don't know how to listen. They believe, like, the majority of people believe they are right. And I think that's the wrong mentality to have. I think that the right mentality is, okay, have a little bit of confidence in thinking that you are correct, but also have the small humility of knowing that you can be taught. You can be given new information as time evolves. But most people are not like that. So that's kind of the problem, right? Is they're not going to listen to the full context of everything. And again, like I said, with Sean Strickland, there's a lot of nuances to his life. So this idea that, okay, I'm just going to talk about Sean Strickland in one positive light and then not talk about the rest because it somehow hurts your feelings and somehow because it triggers this little red pill attitude that you have of this particular person in Sean Strickland. Okay, now I'm going to respond, oh my goodness, this guy he's a liberal wussy or this and that. He's a soy boy or this and that. Look, here's the thing. I don't even lean one particular direction or the other. Us Muslims, we don't have a political direction. if you're a true Muslim, this is something you have to understand. There is no political right wing or left wing in Islam. There's only one way. And I think for the most part, it's fair to say that Islam is a very conservative religion, but it doesn't mean that we're going to stick to the same vernacular or dichotomy of this right wing red pill aspect of the world, right? Which is kind of the issue with, let's say, Andrew Tate coming into the Islamic fold. And again, it's not a bad thing that he converted to Islam. It's great, right? At the same time, you got to understand too, he's also sort of humble in accepting new information that comes with being a new Muslim. The problem is a lot of his followers, perhaps, who are probably going to be Muslim, and then a lot of them are going to be right wing guys, right? Because you got to remember, there's a problem with Andrew Tate having a Muslim fan base and a right wing fan base. I'm going to tell you right now, just off top, this random audible that I'm throwing in there. Right? This show isn't even anything about Andrew Tate, so I figured I'd just throw this in there. The problem with Andrew Tate having, let's say, a right wing and a Muslim fan base is the confusion that he's going to create, especially amongst the Muslims. Because, for one, they're going to mix ideas with the red pill culture and Islamic ideology and theology on top of that, and somehow think that they are both correlated because this man who has a right wing and a Muslim fan base in Andrew Tate practices it this way or is perceived to practice it that way. And again, I'm being very fair because the way that I've seen and the way that people have talked about Andrew Tate's conversion to Islam, I think it's spoken in a very humble manner in the way that he's approaching it. He's acting as a student, not so much of it as a teacher, because obviously if you go into all these little videos that he does of these hustle culture things that he's trying to sell to you in his TikTok or his YouTube back in the days or whatever, right? It's just all about, I don't know, it's all about like doing things in a particular matter that is, I guess, opposite of what a lot of the left is doing right now, right? Okay, so a lot of these things sort of aligned. There's some of these key notes and key points that both Muslims and right wing people align with. At the same time, there's also a lot of things that are not, right? And I don't want to go into it because a lot of them are controversial issues. They're not worth going into. I think at some point maybe I should go start a Patreon. What do you guys think? Right? If you guys want to, let's say, talk about some real uncensored type of content, maybe I should open a Patreon and we'll see how many people I get out of that. But yeah, neither here or there. We'll probably go into like some of the most craziest topics ever that you just can't talk about on YouTube. You can't talk about in any other platform channel. Look, that's the thing you got to understand, right? Is I think you got to understand that controversy sells, but at the same time, is it moral? Is the controversy that you're selling moral? That's kind of some of the things that you got to really ask about Andrew Tate. But yeah, back to this Khamzat versus Sean Strickland fight. I think I'm just going to call it a day with this one right here. I think that this fight is not going to happen anytime soon. I think that because of the visa issues that Khamzat is currently working on, that is really highly dependent on a lot of those things and how he can fit into a lot of these big US shows that they would do, let's say, in Vegas or New York. With Sean Strickland, there's a possibility that he might just go and fight Dricus du Plessis, just like the comment that you saw earlier where somebody mentioned, yeah, it would be great to see him fight Dricus. Because, yeah, Dricus earned it, right? He did beat Robert Whitaker. But Khamzat is a big name, 6.5 million followers, big name in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and now in America. It's sky's the limit for the guy, so they're willing to give him a shot. Either way, like and subscribe, guys. I'm gonna get out of here. It was really fun doing this live stream, getting to react to some of the older videos that I did, and we're gonna go back and do some more of those in the near future. But in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe. Inshallah.